What's up, guys? Reporting live from the gym parking lot. I'm just sitting in my car before I go in and do legs. And I have that nervous anxiousness feeling in my stomach, just like how I do with every single leg day. And I'm just really anxious, obviously, and really nervous to hit this session. And this is kind of how leg days have gone for me over the course of like the past 3 years, honestly. And some people may be thinking like as you go through this and you do this longer, you would think that you would be better about handling that. And I actually find that it's the opposite. It actually gets worse the more that I go, and that's just because the weights get heavier. And it's a cliche thing to say, but like the work never gets easier. I think that you just kind of get easier or better at handling it. And so real quick, I just kind of wanted to talk through what I like to do in situations like this. I try to stay very, very calm. The music that I listen to is really important on days like this. I try not to listen to upbeat music like rap or metal or stuff like that. I find like that will actually just get my heart rate super, super high to the point where it's actually counterintuitive to my training and doesn't help me out at all. And then I try to remind myself that I have done everything that I need to do in order to be able to come in and hit numbers this session. I got 8 hours of sleep last night. I've gotten my steps. I've done my cardio, stretching, mobility work. I'm properly hydrated. I haven't missed a meal in fucking years, but like especially not anytime soon. I haven't cheated on my diet in a long time. So I've done all the things that I need to do in order to guarantee that I come in here and hit numbers. The way that I try to think about it and what I try to remind myself is that the numbers have basically already been hidden. It's just up to me to go in there and make it happen. And as long as I try my best to stay calm and focus on one set at a time, one rep at a time. I know that's like really corny and cliche, but that really is the truth. I find that I can grind my way through these sessions, and then by the time that I kind of get warmed up and get moving, the nervous anxiousness goes away and it gets replaced with excitement, and I get ready to fuck shit up. So speaking of fucking shit up, we're gonna go in and we're gonna get it done. Thanks for listening to a meathead ramble for a little bit. What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and welcome back to another video in a series that I'm probably just gonna call New Gym, New Toys, or something like that. Just something that kind of details my training program changes as I have moved on to this new gym. So I figured it would only, make sense for me to follow up the first installment of this series with the other part of it. So you guys saw Legs B the other day, so I wanted to show you guys Legs A today. So Legs A would be what I guess you could consider my quad-focused session. This is the session where I do a major compound squatting movement, and in this instance, I do 2 of them. So pretty similarly to Legs B, I do have 2 sets of a bicep curl that I do on this leg day. On this particular leg day, I've been choosing to use this cable curl. I really like this attachment that I'm using. The angle that I'm filming from is not really the best to show, but it is the kind of cambered style bar that matches what an easy curl bar is. In my opinion, I think it's probably best to do the majority of your bicep work unilaterally, just so that you can properly align the shoulder, wrist, and elbow and get perfect alignment and force transfer through the bicep. But honestly, man, like after doing the vast majority of my stuff unilateral, like on my pull days, I just like to do bilateral stuff on my leg days just to get this shit done and over with and just move on. I kind of have mentioned many times on all my social media outlets that I think that arm training is just boring as hell, and so I really just kind of like to get it done and over with in as little time as possible, if I'm being honest. On this particular day, I chose to do my bicep curls at the beginning of the session, largely because of the amount of nerves and stress that I was feeling prior to going into this session. If you guys took the time to listen to my little rant that came before this that I posted on my TikTok channel, I'm typically very, very nervous before my leg days, but on this leg day in particular, I was extremely nervous. And so one of the things that I like to do when that happens is I like to do something like really easy right off the bat. Obviously, I'm only doing 2 sets of a bicep curl on the leg days, and honestly, it's very, very easy, almost effortless for me to be able to progress those sets on a week-to-week basis. And so when I go into the gym on a day like today where I'm feeling very, very stressed and anxious and nervous because of the stuff that I'm going to have to do and the numbers that I'm going to have to hit, I have found that if I can just do like something really easy right off the bat and just take some very easy progressions immediately right into the session, that kind of gives me a good little confidence boost, and it kind of makes me feel good and kind of like shake off the nerves and kind of go from a thought process of being like, oh, I'm really scared to do this session today, or man, these hacks and these pendulums are going to be really hard. And then after I kind of nail off 2 progressions right away, I'm like, okay, fuck yeah, I feel good. We're ready to work, and that kind of shifts my mindset entirely. And I don't know if that's something that a lot of people take into consideration when they think about training programming. In the last leg day video, I mentioned why I like to do my harder exercises towards the end of the session. And one of the things that I mentioned in that video was just simply because of the mental preparation and the mental fatigue that goes into doing those exercises. And it's a big reason why I like to do them towards the end and not towards the beginning anymore, because I kind of like to use this isolation work as like confidence boosters. And as I go through and I progress my bicep curls and I progress my calf raises and I progress my adductors, I kind of think of it as I'm like building momentum that is leading up towards these 1 or 2 all-out sets on these extremely important and taxing exercises. And that's just personally, from a mental standpoint, a big reason why I like to program my leg days like this. Typically, after the bicep curls, I would get into my calf raises, but the calf raise was actually taken at this time on this particular day, so I just kind of flip-flopped the order and did the adductor, I guess, first as part of my leg portion, second exercise, and I went ahead and knocked the adductors out. Nothing really different between the adductors on this leg workout than the other leg workout. Obviously, I'm still using the hoist adductor. The only thing that's different is that I am not using a 3-count pause on the first set. So on legs B, I did 2 sets. The first one had a 3-count pause and a peak contraction, and then the second one would be what I would consider to just be normal reps, which is kind of like what you're seeing here, where I have a good solid peak contraction, but it's not exaggerated. I'm not making a conscious effort to drag that peak contraction out as long as I can. And typically on legs B, both of those sets, the paused reps one and the straight set one, would be higher rep range. Typically, I like to do higher rep range work on this leg day too, but you'll notice obviously on the clip here that this is going to be a 6-rep adductor set. I typically do not do adductor work in this low of a rep range, just because I have a history of adductor injuries, and that's something that just has been plaguing me over the course of the past couple of years. So typically I like to do nothing below the 8 or 10 rep range on the adductors. Unfortunately, this particular adductor, the weight stacks only go up from 10 pounds. And last week I had hit 90 pounds for like the top end of the rep range. So I had to bump up to the next step, which would have been 100. And the reps just dropped off quite a bit to 6. But even in an instance where I would do this, I will still always do a high rep set first. I would never come in and first set on the adductor do my low rep set. I would only do the low rep set second after I had done a higher rep set first, just to kind of get warmed up in that area and get that area loose, basically, just because at this point I've injured my adductor so many times that I refuse to go through that process again if I can avoid it. And so I'm just trying to do everything that I can to stay safe on there. But despite the fact that I went in that low of a rep range on this particular day, I still felt nice and strong, and I'm confident that I can build that up. That's a 6-rep set right now, and I'm confident I can build that up to a 12 to 15 over the course of the next month to 6 weeks. So again, the calf raise was taken, and I typically do that first. but I decided to hop on it after the adductor. I am doing a toe press on here. Every time I post something about a toe press, people will ask what a toe press is. It's not a fancy exercise, guys. All that a toe press is a calf raise that you do on a leg press. Obviously this isn't a machine that is designed for being a calf raise, but you can use it as a calf raise. And I've just always heard it called a toe press, so that's what I call it. It just mimics a standing calf raise. My gym really only has one standing calf raise machine, and I use that standing calf raise machine on legs B, as you guys probably saw. And so I just like to use a different exercise on this day just for a little bit of variation. What you will notice after I hit failure here on the calf raises is that I have started to incorporate some tibialis raises. So basically what happens is as soon as I hit failure on the calf raise, I shift my feet up pretty high, and then I do contractions with my tibialis. And this really has nothing to do with aesthetic reasons, building the size of my tibialis. Obviously, that would be nice if that happens, but that isn't my main goal when doing this. Obviously, if you guys have been followers of my content for a while, you may be familiar with the fact that my ankle mobility is really, really poor. And at this point, I'm pretty desperate to fix that because, in my personal opinion, the biggest thing that I need to improve in my physique is my quads. And up until this point, the main reason why my quads have kind of lagged behind all my other muscle groups is simply, in my opinion, because of my ankle mobility. My ankle mobility is so poor that when I move into a squatting pattern, I cannot take a low, narrow stance on that squatting pattern. I have to take like a higher, wider stance, which we know anatomically biases the glutes and the hips a little bit more. So I think my glutes, I'm not saying my glutes are great, but like when you compare my glutes to my quads definitely kind of outweigh my quads and kind of make my quads look small. And that is obviously an issue for me with someone who has bodybuilding goals. So, and when you take a look at my squat patterns over the course of the past like 5 years of my training career, almost all of it is like high and wide stance because I have poor ankle mobility. So I'm very desperate to fix my ankle mobility, and I think that this is going to be a very important concept to that. Not only do I think this is going to be important for improving my ankle mobility, I also think that this is going to play dividends for strengthening my knees. As of late, I have been paying a lot of attention to the content of Ben Patrick. He goes by the username of Knees Over Toes, and he's basically an expert in the field of mobility and flexibility, and particularly within mobility for athletes. So not just doing static stretches, but incorporating exercises that actually will improve your mobility. And the vast majority of his content is geared towards traditional athletes like football players, basketball players, and injury prevention and things along those lines. But he's also done plenty of content and podcasts with powerlifters and weightlifters and has basically, I wouldn't say convinced me, because I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say that I have agreed with a lot of his methods. But basically, he's kind of opened my eyes to the idea that these things can be beneficial for everybody. And so I'm trying to get very, very deliberate in incorporating these tibialis raises amongst a bunch of other things in order to help improve my mobility and my functional movement. So on this particular day, on the first set, I did 10 calf raises and then I got 10 tib raises. And then on the second set here, I got 9 calf raises and 7 tib raises. So that will be interesting to measure as I kind of go through this process here. It kind of seems like the amount of tib raises to calf raises that I should be able to get is like fairly close to 1-to-1. So if I get 10 calf raises, I should be able to get around 10 tib raises before my tibialis kind of give out. And then obviously the 9-to-7 is not a 1-to-1, but it's fairly close there. And for the first time with me doing this, it'll just be really interesting for me to gauge how that typically works. But I'm very, very excited excited to get to the point where I'm more comfortable with these tib raises. Obviously, I'm very excited to see what it does for my ankle mobility and knee health, but I'm really kind of shifting my focus more to improving my logbook numbers on them. I would say on my first set that I may have had one more rep left in the tibialis portion of the set. I would say on the second set here, I hit what I would consider to be failure for the tibialis, and that was a very unique feeling. That is for sure. After I do the calves and adductors, I get into the leg extensions and leg curls. On this particular day, the leg extension was taken, and so I did the leg curl. I would prefer to do the leg extension and then the leg curl so that I'm not going straight from the leg extension into the squatting movements. That kind of gives my quads a little time for the localized fatigue to kind of clear out, but it really doesn't make too much of a difference to me at the end of the day. If you guys saw on the legs B video, I was doing the lying hamstring curl, then obviously it'll make sense to you why I'm doing the seated hamstring curl on this particular day. One, just for variation, but two, the positioning of the seated leg curl allows me to kind of get into a position where I can fully lengthen the hamstrings, and I can also cause and create a little bit more tension in there just because of the resistance profile on the seated leg curl. And because this is my only hamstring exercise on this particular day, I do want to pick something that is lengthened loaded. We know that exercises that are lengthened loaded or put the muscle under a full stretch will be more hypertrophic per set than exercises that overload in the short per se. So if I only have one exercise on this day to train the hamstrings, I am going to pick something that will try and put the hamstrings through their fully contractile range of motion, and then preferably overload in the lengthened position as well. And so that's why I like the seated leg curl. And I also kind of like the seated leg curl because no matter what kind of setup that you take on a lying hamstring curl, there is going to be some degree of like lower back and glute involvement. And it is better for me to avoid that going into my squats. I actually find that it helps me when I go into a hip hinge pattern. So you would think that, having a slight activation in your low back and glutes would negatively impact my RDLs, but I actually find that it improves my RDLs, but I do find that it negatively impacts my squats. Don't ask me why that is. I don't have any scientific reason for you guys. That's just something that I've observed from trial and error, is that I personally prefer to do the seated leg curl on my squat days and do the lying leg curl on my hip hinge days, whereas others would probably think something different. And again, I don't have any scientific evidence or anything for that. I'm sure there's somebody out there that could probably give scientific evidence as for why me doing that is stupid, but it's just a personal preference thing that I like to do, and I think at the end of the day that is worth its weight in gold, doing things the way that you want to do them as long as it's not actively taking away from your performance. So from here, I get into the leg extension. As I mentioned on the last leg day video, this is the life extension model, which is fucking awesome. I just love it so much. Probably my favorite leg extension that I've ever used. Now, typically on this day, I will only do one set of the leg extension, but I have really been considering adding a second one for a while, and I felt particularly good on this day. By the time I get to this point in the session, I felt very, very good. All the nerves and the anxiousness and everything had gone away, and I was kind of in full-blown demon mode. And so I did decide to add on that second set today. As we'll notice when we get into the squatting lifts, I did regress one rep on both sets of the squats because of that, but I kind of expected that to happen. Obviously I can't do more quad work before I get into the squats, and expect the squats not to be negatively impacted by that. But I did decide to add on that second set today. We'll kind of run with this for a few rotations and see if it's something that I can consistently get away with. If I can't, then I'll just drop back to one, but I would just like to experiment with it for a little bit, just because it's kind of been weighing on my mind, and I've just been thinking, oh, what would happen if I added in a second set of leg extension? So instead of just thinking about what would happen, I just decided to do it and see what would happen. Very, very brutal. Obviously, leg extensions are, in my opinion, like a slept-on exercise when it comes to intensity. I think not many people would consider a leg extension to be particularly intense, but my leg extension sets can almost make me just as nervous as my sets for my major squatting motions. Speaking of my major squatting motions, here's where we get into the meat and potatoes. So reverse banded hack squat off the bat. I'm going to show all my warm-ups and everything. By this point, man, my hips, knees, calves, ankles, everything is all warmed up and ready to go. So I don't feel the need to do excessive amounts of warm-up work before I get into the working sets on the bread and butter movements. On this particular day, I did 5 plates and 5 pounds for the working set. So I just do warm-ups with 1 plate, 2 plates, 3 plates, and 4 plates. And the reps go down as the weight goes up. If you guys have been following my content for a while, you're pretty familiar with my warm-up procedure. So I do my first 2 warm-ups on the hack without the reverse band. And then once I get to the midway point of my warm-ups, I do add on the reverse band. So every single time that I post this leg day on Instagram or TikTok or any other form of social media, I'll get people that will ask why it is that I like to do the hack and the pendulum in the same session, and that may kind of come off as kind of redundant. And I have 2 good reasons, and there's probably a third one that I'm not thinking of. So the first one is this particular hack squat is the same hack squat that I've been using every single quad-focused leg day for the past 3.5, if not 4 years. Obviously, I had to move from my old gym to this new gym, but my old gym had this same exact hack squat, and I had been using that hack squat every single leg day for the past 4 years. So I really, really love this hack. I have a ton of time invested into this hack. And building up logbook numbers on it. And so when I see a machine like this that I'm obviously extremely familiar with, I want to continue to use it so that I can continue to use it as a gauge of my strength. The second reason is because of the reverse banded setup. I kind of am shifting the hack squat into more of a mid-range lengthened movement. So typically a hack squat without the reverse bands on it would be lengthened loaded and would be overload in the lengthened position. But because I add the reverse band onto it, that kind of removes some of the tension in the bottom and kind of makes it a more mid-range or even resistance profile. And that kind of makes it a good like 1-2 punch to the pendulum squat, which is what I'm going to do after this, because the pendulum squat is unbelievably heavy in the lengthened loaded position. So if I had to pick between the hack or the pendulum, which one is going to be better in the lengthened position, I would always pick the pendulum, especially considering, which you will see here, my reps on this hack squat are dead stop, meaning that I come to the bottom and the weight actively touches those bottom pegs there. And that is because I could get lower on this hack squat, but those pegs there stop it from getting any lower. Obviously, this is a good amount of knee flexion, but there is, maybe an inch or 2 more that I could get if those pegs weren't there. But I am able to get that range of motion on the pendulum squat. So when we consider that this hack squat here by default is going to like shortchange my range of motion by an inch or 2, in my opinion, it makes sense. If I'm trying to load the lengthened position on this hack squat, I have a better exercise available to me that I can do that on in the pendulum squat. So that makes me think, what's a better way that I can utilize this hack squat? And because of the setup of the hack squat, I think that using the reverse band and making it more mid-range dominant is going to be a better way for me to use this. And then at this point, I've done an exercise that overloads the muscle in the shortened position, the leg extension. I've done a muscle that overloads the muscle in the mid-range position, the reverse banded hack squat. And now it's time to get everything out of the lengthened position and really finish off my quads. And the pendulum squat is the perfect opportunity for me to do that. You can see the stance that I'm taking on this pendulum squat is very, very low. My heels are actually actively coming off of the platform. I get a lot of questions about this too. Again, going back to the ankle mobility thing, in a perfect world, I would be able to keep my feet low on the platform while maintaining contact with my heel, but that isn't the case. And for me to take a stance that does allow me to keep my heel on the ground, it is not going to be a quad dominant stance. Obviously, I have 5 years of experience at this point with all of my squats being very glute and hip dominant. That is what my body wants to default to. So I have to force myself to take a stance that is going to be more quad dominant, which is the stance that you see here. And if that means that I have to come off the platform with my heels and maybe lose a little bit of potential to transfer force, I do think that is a worthwhile trade-off for me to make to be able to bias the musculature that I'm trying to bias on this particular exercise. Now, the good news is that I get stronger as I get stronger on this pendulum squat, and as I improve my ability to get into deep knee flexion through my ankle mobility stuff, I will be able to maintain the same foot stance that you're seeing here with my heel making contact. But until that point happens, I am not going to, shy away from this range of motion or shy away from this foot stance just because I can't comfortably hit it. I really think the way that I'm going to improve my ankle mobility is just by sheerly forcing myself into these uncomfortable positions and just letting the musculature stretch out over time under load. Again, going back to Ben Patrick, the knees over toes guy that I mentioned over in the calf raise segment, that's one of the things that he preaches with mobility, is if you want to improve mobility of a muscle, you can't just do these static stretches and expect to get drastic changes. If you want to get drastic changes, you need to stretch the muscles under load, because the load is going to force the musculature to lengthen in those new areas of range of motion, which is going to allow you to be able to own that range of motion a little bit greater over time. All right, guys, I think I pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover in this particular leg day. As always, if you guys have any questions about programming or anything at all, really, just feel free to leave them in the comments. I will end the voiceover at this point and just let you guys enjoy the rest of this pendulum squat set. Thanks again for watching, guys, and as always, take care of yourselves.